Today, or this morning, we are on Victoria Street, SW1, City of Westminster, to help highlight the forever changing architecture and theme of London. This road here is particularly important, not just to Londoners, but for London's tourism. It leads up to Parliament itself. And the reason we're going to use this road is because it's so symbolic, which you're about to find out. Now, if we look behind me, we see some better architecture than we're about to see in the shape of Victoria Palace and the Duke of York, but these are relatively new, and as you can see, they're situated just behind what we call Little Ben. But if we just glance over here to the cameraman's left, this is what we're going to be seeing a lot of, this sort of new build, right? So this historic location, which has seen all sorts of wonderful people and occasions, has become just another modern dwelling. Now, if we pan down here, we see a world unlike that of London. And people say, well, London's a progressive city, it's forever changing. But it's that change that we worry about, isn't it? Because change isn't a good thing necessarily, it's how change takes place. So we're going to have a little walk down there, and then we're going to conclude or have a little chat at a beautiful little building which genuinely helps to show how much this area has fallen, in my opinion, from grace. So let's go and have a look. So I've hated this thing for years. You see the way it splits to either side, or the way that the road actually splits. And this type of building here, as you know, ugly as it is ultimately, this is John Lewis head office. These were here through the 70s, this style. And, you know, it comes down to opinion, but I prefer buildings like this, even though they are not very nice to look at, in comparison with this glass structure here, which it sort of looks like the sort of thing, in my opinion, a child would draw because they don't know any better, because they don't understand the importance of maintaining cultural relevance to a community. So it just looks like something that, you know, once you're done drawing dinosaurs, you draw something like that. So let's go and have a further look. Also, this area, for all its opulent wealth, is renowned for the homeless. My whole life, it's been very well known for the homeless. It's like Bond Street or Oxford Circus. The homeless seem to come up here and deliberately live along the back of these buildings because the extravagant wealth here genuinely forks out enough for them to survive in these parts of the street. But bear in mind, like I said, this is a very important place, because if you've never seen Parliament before, there's huge chance you're going to come from Westminster Station or you're going to come from Victoria Station, and this is your first view of, shall we say, the height of British power or English power. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and avoid in and out, because where the buildings are so tall either side of the road, it's going to be hard for us to actually show you properly, but we'll try our best. You can see the real gravity of how these buildings make the place look. We could have easily built something more impressive that's a reminder of why this area is so powerful, instead of this as our skyline. Now, Westminster Cathedral here, if you look at any of the old footage from the 70s and so on, you'll always see this tower resting somewhere in the background, which helps you line up just how much this road has changed. If you decide to look for yourself, that building there will be a marker for you. Now, this is a lovely building, but also harbours some wonderful secrets, such as John Southworth, who was, in the 1500s, one of the 40 martyrs of England and Wales. And this would be the execution of Catholics. So if you go in there, his remains are situated there, actual remains are in there. It's a fascinating bit of history, this cathedral. And as I was saying, it's a marker for if you want to investigate the area. We still have some of the older buildings here intact, like that one there, which the arches run beneath. So if you look back in time, you'll see throughout our recent history, very recent history, these arches still existing. So even back in the 70s, 80s and so on, there was this sort of gentrified shopping feel to this area, as well as it being an important place for the civil service and, dare I say, the country. Just behind this cathedral, which in itself is magnificent, are some awe-inspiring buildings which the architecture alone makes myself and others proud, and they are very, very much the polar opposite to this. Let's go. These have been here quite a while, and no, it's not awe-inspiring or stunning, but it's a lot less depressing than everything we've just passed. And here you have it, the Albert, the only building left from the original site itself, the only surviving building on this street from the 1800s. Everything else past the 1800s is brand new, out of the wrapper in comparison with this. And look how glorious it is shining in front of these horrific new builds directly behind them. You can see, look at this thing attached to it here, this black building here on the back. That's absolutely mortifying, that is. They've actually attached, you see, to the brickwork, that odd looking curved black building there. So this pub was built on a site of a previous pub, and for me, is probably my favourite when it comes to telling the story of Britain's lost and living pubs. When it comes to modernisation, and it comes to what I see as our overall loss, this pub to me, when I first started making this series or making these programmes about Britain's lost and living pubs and on the homogeny of our architecture and our society in general, this really stood out to me and instantaneously became the profile picture for the pub series. And it's not difficult to see why, because for me, it's not just the building and the backdrop, it's where it is and what it means to us. And if we just glance at the elegance of the glass, the brickwork, you've got the interesting balconies up there, and you see an interesting balcony just off the back with the old-fashioned pub sign. And it couldn't be a more hurtful or meaningful symbol as to how far this place has come, and in what I see as a negative way. That, to myself, Londoners, Britons, and the English, I hope, is a heartbreaking sight. Okay, so let's have a little look at this sign, because this sign tells us a bit about the history of the pub. So between 1845 to 1852, and originally known as the Blue Coat Boy, in June 1862 the freehold was purchased by the Artillery Brewery in Victoria Street from the Dean and Chapter of Westminster for the sum of £978. It was then a workshop and 2 adjoining cottages. The property was rebuilt between 1865 to 1867, but different sources give different dates for this, and renamed the Albert, as it is today. The renowned Carvery restaurant on the first floor is frequented by British royalty, cabinet ministers and parliamentarians of note. The latter being recalled to Parliament by means of division bell featured in the restaurant. What that means is in many local pubs around Westminster, they have a little bell that comes up in the screen whenever there's an important vote in Parliament or an important discussion in Parliament, and it alerts the local civil servants or parliamentarians exactly what's going on. They might need to get down to the House of Commons. So the ground floor bar features the original Victorian hand-cut windows together with gas lighting. Now, I was about to say I absolutely love the lanterns here, I love the windows here. They've got that vibe similar to that of the Modesty panel. But let's have a little look, shall we, at the building next to it. Because this, for me, is a prime example of the lack of care shown. I mean, look over the road, look how beautiful those buildings are. See those buildings there? See how stunning they are? And then look at what's attached to the Albert. Look. Look at this. Boom. What is that? Just a chunk of lead lying on the floor there? But what an anticlimax that is in comparison with the glory of that building. So there's the Albert where we just came from, and you can see all the way down Victoria Street where we just came from, and we're now going to continue on Victoria Street. And this site here, I mean, we can see some type of modern art feature which helps exemplify the point I'm trying to make, but even more so than that, if we turn over here we see the New World once more. Now this is where the building of New Scotland Yard once stood, and now these are obviously being changed for accommodation and retail. And as you can see, it looks like something straight out of Star Trek. As I say in many pieces concerning modernisation, these could be anywhere. You could be in Japan, you could be in New York. Further, I mean, even this brand new flat here, you can see straight into the flats, look. And I don't know about you, but if you was forking out a lot of money, which you will be for these properties, this isn't the view I'd want. Now, the amount of people that are tourists that head that way from behind me is obviously numerous in number. You can tell by the sort of people that you see in this area, there's a lot of tourists. And if you're coming from Westminster and you're heading down there, what's the difference between wherever you come from? Unless you've come from a depraved third world country, this is the sort of thing you're going to see in your city, isn't it? It's not individual or important, is it? If I go to France, I want to see France. I don't want to see another Victoria Street. And so ends Victoria Street, leading up to Parliament Square there, which you can see just there. You can see the opulence of the buildings here, returning us to our former glory in our minds, if you like. It's quite, I mean, apart from that disgusting Queen Elizabeth Centre over there, but this entire location is supposed to mean so much to us. Instead of looking at new builds and thinking, oh, how progressive, watch out, cameraman, get killed. I want you to maybe start thinking about how ugly they actually look. Too many of our youth, too many people, even from the older generation, they've been tricked into believing that progressive architecture is somehow, it's good for the economy, the environment, but overall it's awful for absolutely everything, including our mental health, our social state, and society in general. So, as always, please think for yourself and remember that loving your own isn't the same as hating others. I'll see you soon. Take care.